The mirror in the boutique's fitting room reflected more than just fabric and form. It held 23 years of sisterly judgment, crystallized in a single moment that would shatter everything Maya Rodriguez thought she knew about her family. The emerald green dress clung to her curves like liquid silk, its beaded bodice catching the harsh fluorescent light and transforming it into something that made her feel, for the first time in months, genuinely beautiful. She turned sideways, watching how the fabric moved with her body, how it seemed to enhance, rather than hide, the figure she'd learned to apologize for since adolescence. "You're really going to wear that?" The voice cut through the small space like a blade through paper, sharp and dismissive. Maya's older sister, Elena, stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her designer blazer, her perfectly contoured face twisted into an expression Maya had learned to read as disappointment mixed with barely concealed embarrassment. "I mean, don't you think it's a little much for you?" The words landed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, finding exactly the right place to cut deepest. Maya felt her shoulders instinctively curl inward, her hands moving to smooth the dress over her hips in a gesture that had become automatic whenever Elena's gaze lingered too long on her appearance. The boutique suddenly felt too small, too bright, too exposed. Through the thin curtain, she could hear the gentle murmur of other shoppers, the rustle of clothing being tried on and discarded, the normal sounds of women preparing for special occasions that now seemed to mock her own deflated excitement. "I'm wearing it for Marcus's company gala," Maya said quietly, her voice lacking the confidence she'd felt just moments ago when she'd first slipped into the dress. I thought it looked nice." Elena stepped further into the fitting room, her heels clicking against the polished floor with the authority of someone who'd never questioned her right to occupy any space. She was everything Maya had grown up measuring herself against and finding herself lacking. Tall where Maya was average height, naturally slender where Maya carried curves, effortlessly elegant where Maya had to work for every moment of grace. Elena's dark hair fell in perfectly styled waves past her shoulders, while Maya's identical curls had been tamed into a conservative bun that suddenly felt childish and severe. Nice is one thing, but this? This is trying too hard. You know how Marcus's colleagues are. They're sophisticated people, Maya. They're used to a certain aesthetic. She paused, letting her eyes travel from Maya's face down to her feet and back up again. Maybe something in black? Something more forgiving. The word forgiving hung in the air between them like poison gas, invisible but suffocating. Maya had heard that word applied to her clothing choices countless times throughout her life. Forgiving cuts, forgiving colors, forgiving styles that would supposedly camouflage her body rather than celebrate it. She watched Elena in the mirror, noting how her sister's reflections seemed to take up more space than her own, how Elena's presence made everything else in the room fade into insignificance. "I've been working out," Maya said, the words coming out more defensive than she'd intended. "I've lost 15 pounds since Christmas. I thought it was time to try something different." "Oh, honey." Elena's voice softened into the condescending tone she'd perfected over years of playing the role of concerned older sister. "It's not about the weight. It's about knowing what works for your body type. This dress, it's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's designed for someone with a different structure. Someone taller, maybe. Someone with less..." She gestured vaguely at Maya's chest and hips. "You want to look elegant, not desperate for attention." The dressing room mirror reflected the tableau of Maya's life in miniature. Elena commanding the space with her presence, while Maya seemed to shrink, smaller and smaller, becoming a supporting character in her own story. The emerald green dress that had made her feel like a goddess now felt like a costume she had no right to wear, a beautiful lie that her sister could see through with surgical precision. Maya's phone buzzed against the small bench where she had placed her purse, but she didn't move to check it. The sound seemed to come from another world where she was the kind of woman who received texts that mattered, who had friends who cared about her choices, who lived a life worth documenting. Here, in this harsh fluorescent lighting, with Elena's disapproval pressing against her like a physical weight, that world felt impossibly distant.
Remember Sarah's wedding last year? Elena continued, settling onto the bench as if preparing for a longer conversation. You wore that purple dress, the one with the flutter sleeves? Now that was perfect for you. Classic, understated, appropriate. This green thing? She shook her head slowly. It's just not you, Maya. And I'm telling you this because I love you. I don't want you to walk into that gala and have people whispering. The mention of Sarah's wedding brought back a flood of memories Maya had tried to suppress. She remembered standing at the edge of the reception, watching other women dance, while she sat at the singles table in her appropriate purple dress, feeling invisible and safe and utterly forgettable. She remembered catching the bouquet by accident and the polite laughter that followed, the way people's eyes had skimmed past her as if she were part of the furniture. She remembered Elena introducing her to people as "my little sister," in a tone that somehow managed to diminish rather than endear. "I like this dress," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It makes me feel confident." Confidence comes from within. It's not about wearing clothes that don't suit you to try to be someone you're not. True confidence is knowing your strengths and playing to them. You're smart, Maya. You're kind. You don't need to put on some kind of performance to prove your worth. The words sounded reasonable, even caring, but they landed like individual drops of acid on Maya's skin. Each compliment came wrapped in a criticism. Each affirmation carried the implication that she was currently failing to embody the very qualities Elena was praising. Maya found herself nodding along, her resistance crumbling under the familiar weight of her sister's well-intentioned wisdom. Through the boutique's main area, she could hear the excited chatter of other women, friends helping each other choose outfits for dates and parties and important events, voices full of encouragement and celebration. She wondered what it would feel like to have someone in her corner, someone who saw her potential rather than her limitations, someone who wanted her to shine rather than blend into the background. Her phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. Elena glanced at it with mild annoyance. "Aren't you going to get that? It could be Marcus." Maya reached for her phone, grateful for the excuse to break eye contact with her sister's penetrating gaze. The screen showed 2 texts from Zoe, her friend from the community center where Maya volunteered teaching art to underprivileged kids. The first message was a simple, "How's the dress shopping going?" followed by a selfie of Zoe making an encouraging face with her thumbs up. The second text had arrived just moments ago. "Remember what we talked about. You deserve to feel gorgeous." Looking at Zoe's messages, Maya felt a small flutter of something she'd almost forgotten. The feeling of being genuinely supported, of having someone believe in her without conditions or reservations. Zoe had been the one to encourage Maya to shop for something special for the gala, had spent an entire lunch break convincing Maya that she deserved to feel beautiful and confident at Marcus's company event. "Just a friend checking in," Maya said, setting the phone back down. But something in her posture had shifted slightly, a barely imperceptible straightening that didn't go unnoticed. Elena's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "That's nice, dear, but friends aren't the ones who have to be seen with you at important professional events. They're not the ones who understand the nuances of corporate culture. I've been to dozens of these galas, Maya. I know what works and what doesn't." The reminder of Elena's superior experience in navigating high society events landed exactly as intended. Elena was married to a successful lawyer, moved in circles that Maya could only imagine, understood etiquette and fashion and social dynamics that remained mysterious to Maya, despite her best efforts to learn. Elena had attended finishing school, spoke 3 languages, could discuss wine and art and politics with equal fluency. She was everything Maya aspired to be, but somehow never quite achieved. Maya turned back to the mirror, trying to see the dress through Elena's eyes. Was it too tight? Too revealing? Too desperate? The green that had looked so vibrant and alive now seemed garish under her sister's scrutiny. The beading that had caught the light so beautifully now felt excessive, like she was trying to compensate for some fundamental inadequacy with sparkle and flash.
Maybe you're right, Maya said finally, her hand moving to the zipper at her back. Maybe I should look for something more suitable. Aleda's smile was warm and satisfied, the expression of someone who had successfully guided a confused child away from a dangerous decision. I knew you'd see reason. There's this lovely boutique downtown that specializes in classic pieces for professional events. We could go there after this, find you something that really showcases your best features. As Maya began to remove the emerald dress, carefully lifting it over her head to avoid disturbing her hair, she caught sight of herself in the mirror again. For just a moment, she saw not Elena's version of who she should be, but a glimpse of who she might become, a woman bold enough to wear emerald green, confident enough to demand attention, strong enough to trust her own judgment about what made her feel beautiful. But the moment passed as quickly as it had come, replaced by the familiar comfort of resignation. Elena knew best. Elena always knew best. Elena had never steered her wrong before, had she? The boutique continued to hum with activity around them, a world of women making choices about how they wanted to present themselves to the world. But in the small, mirrored space of the fitting room, Maya hung the emerald dress back on its hanger and reached for the safety of her regular clothes, telling herself that appropriate was better than authentic, that fitting in was more important than standing out. She didn't notice Elena's satisfied smile in the reflection, or the way her sister's The apartment was quiet in the evenings, filled with the sounds of her neighbors' lives filtering through thin walls. She could hear Mrs. Patterson next door watching game shows, the volume turned up to compensate for failing hearing. Above her, the young couple who'd moved in last month had passionate arguments and equally passionate reconciliations, their emotional extremes both foreign and fascinating to Maya. To the left, the graduate student practiced violin at all hours, filling the building with melodies that ranged from beautiful to torturous, depending on the piece and his level of preparation. Maya's own evenings were quiet by comparison, punctuated by phone calls from Elena that always began with the same question. What did you do today? The question sounded casual, even caring, but Maya had learned to read the subtext. Elena wanted to ensure that Maya wasn't making any dramatic changes, wasn't taking risks that might reflect poorly on the family, wasn't developing ideas above her station. These conversations followed a predictable pattern. Maya would share carefully edited versions of her day. Elena would offer advice that sounded supportive but felt limiting, and Maya would hang up feeling somehow smaller than before the call began. I saw the cutest dress at Nordstrom today, Elena might say, her voice bright with the pleasure of sharing good news. Navy blue, just your style, very professional. Perfect for those client presentations you're always nervous about. I could pick it up for you if you'd like. Maya would thank her sister and agree to the purchase, even though she'd never mentioned being nervous about client presentations, even though navy blue made her feel like she was wearing a uniform rather than an expression of her personality. The dress would arrive a few days later, perfectly suitable and utterly forgettable, and it would join the ranks of Elena's other gifts in Maya's closet, a collection of costumes for a life she'd never consciously chosen to live. The community center, where Maya volunteered 3 afternoons a week, offered a different version of herself, one that she guarded jealously from Elena's well-meaning influence. Here, surrounded by children aged 7 to 14, Maya felt permission to be bold that she denied herself in every other area of her life. She taught art classes using supplies she often purchased with her own money, watching shy kids discover their voices through color and creativity, witnessing quiet children bloom into confident artists under her encouragement. "Miss Maya, look what I made!" 10-year-old Jasmine would shout across the room, holding up a painting that violated every rule of realistic representation, but pulsed with emotional truth. Maya would examine these works with the reverence she reserved for masterpieces, pointing out specific choices the child had made, celebrating their willingness to experiment and take risks. It was here that she'd met Zoe, a social worker who ran support groups for at-risk teenagers. Zoe was everything Elena had taught Maya to distrust in other women. Loud, unapologetically confident, prone to wearing clothes that drew attention rather than deflecting it. Zoe's hair was currently dyed a deep burgundy that caught the light when she moved, and she wore jewelry that jangled when she gestured, which was often and with enthusiasm. Their friendship had developed slowly, built on shared lunches in the community center's cramped break room and conversations that stretched long past their official volunteer hours. Zoe had a way of asking questions that Maya wasn't used to hearing. Not what did you do, but how did that make you feel? Not what are you supposed to do, but what do you want to do? You know what I love about teaching art to kids, Maya had told Zoe during one of these extended conversations? They don't second-guess themselves, they just create. They don't worry about whether purple trees are realistic or whether their flowers are the right size. They just put their feelings on paper and trust that it's enough. Zoe had looked at her with those sharp, knowing eyes that seemed to see more than Maya was comfortable revealing. When did you stop trusting that it was enough? She'd ask quietly.
The question had haunted Maya for weeks afterward, following her through her morning routines and her careful clothing choices and her safe design work. When had she stopped trusting her own instincts? When had other people's opinions become more important than her own desires? She couldn't pinpoint an exact moment, but she could trace a pattern of small surrenders, tiny compromises that had accumulated into a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Her relationship with Marcus had developed within this framework of careful self-editing. They'd met at a coffee shop near her office, a chance encounter when he'd complimented her laptop case, a bright red leather bag that Elena had criticized as too flashy for a professional, but that Maya had kept hidden in her closet for months before finally working up the courage to use it. Marcus was handsome in an approachable way, successful but not intimidating, the kind of man Elena would approve of without reservation. Their courtship had been pleasant and predictable, marked by dinners at respectable restaurants and movies chosen by mutual agreement rather than passion. Marcus treated her well, respected her boundaries, never pushed her to be more than what she presented herself as being. He seemed genuinely fond of the carefully curated version of herself that she offered, praising her reliability and her thoughtfulness, her ability to blend seamlessly into his professional and social circles. But sometimes, late at night when Marcus was asleep beside her, Maya would lie awake staring at the ceiling and wondering if he would recognize her if she showed up as her authentic self. Would he still want to date the woman who painted vibrant abstract canvases in her spare time? Would he be interested in the person who sometimes drove to the beach alone just to scream at the ocean? Would he love her if she wore emerald green and demanded to be seen? These midnight doubts were always gone by morning, dissolved by the familiar comfort of routine and the security of being wanted, even if it was only a carefully edited version of herself that was desired. Maya had learned to be grateful for what she had, rather than yearning for what she didn't know she was missing. The gala invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, printed on thick cardstock that spoke of corporate importance and social significance. Marcus's architectural firm was being honored for their work on sustainable building design, and he'd been excited to bring Maya as his date, introducing her to colleagues and clients she'd only heard about in his professional stories. It's going to be quite an event, he told her over dinner at their usual Italian restaurant. The mayor will be there, some city council members, all the major players in sustainable development. I really want you to meet Sarah Chen. She's the head of the Environmental Commission, and she's brilliant. I think you two would really hit it off. Maya had smiled and nodded, already mentally cataloging the questions Elena would ask about her outfit, her conversation topics, her ability to represent Marcus appropriately in such elevated company. The invitation sat on her refrigerator for days, a constant reminder of an opportunity to step into a larger version of her life, before she'd finally worked up the courage to suggest shopping for something special to wear. That's when Zoe had intervened, catching Maya during a particularly vulnerable moment when she'd been staring at her closet and seeing nothing but variations of invisibility. "You know what you need?" Zoe had said, appearing in the doorway of Maya's bedroom like a fairy godmother with practical shoes and strong opinions. "You need to dress like the woman you're becoming, not the woman you've always been."
The phrase had lodged itself in Maya's chest like a seed waiting for the right conditions to grow. The woman she was becoming. It suggested possibility, transformation, a future that might look different from her carefully controlled past. It suggested that change was not only possible, but inevitable. That the version of herself she'd been maintaining was just one option among many. Standing in that boutique fitting room, seeing herself in emerald green, Maya had felt the first stirrings of that woman Elena insisted didn't exist. But her sister's voice had been stronger, more practiced, backed by years of conditioning that had taught Maya to distrust her own eyes when they showed her something different from what others expected to see. Now, 2 days after the boutique incident, Maya sat in her beige living room wearing one of Elena's approved outfits, holding the business card for the classic clothing store her sister had recommended. The gala was in 1 week. Marcus was excited to introduce her to his colleagues. Elena had already offered to help her accessorize whatever suitable dress they found together.
But her phone kept buzzing with messages from Zoe, each one a small rebellion against the safe path Maya found herself walking once again. The messages weren't pushy or judgmental. Zoe wasn't that type of friend. Instead, they were gentle reminders of possibilities Maya had briefly glimpsed in that fitting room mirror. "Saw the most gorgeous emerald earrings today and thought of you," one message read, accompanied by a photo of jewelry that would have been perfect with the dress Maya had abandoned. "Hope you're treating yourself with kindness today. You deserve beautiful things." Maya stared at the message for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keyboard as she composed and deleted responses. How could she explain that she'd had beauty in her hands and chosen safety instead? How could she articulate the weight of expectations that made bold choices feel like betrayals of everyone who claimed to care about her well-being? Instead, she set the phone aside and picked up Elena's business card, running her fingers over the embossed letters that promised classic elegance for every occasion. In 1 week, she would attend the most important social event of her relationship with Marcus, dressed in something that would make her appropriately invisible, surrounded by successful people who would remember her as pleasant and unremarkable. It was a safe choice, a smart choice. The kind of choice that Elena would be proud of and Marcus would appreciate, and that would ensure Maya never had to face the terrifying possibility of being seen and found wanting. But as she prepared for another evening of careful mediocrity, Maya couldn't quite shake the memory of how it felt to see herself in that emerald dress, not as Elena's little sister or Marcus's appropriate girlfriend, or Janet's reliably competent employee, but as a woman who deserved to be noticed, admired, celebrated for her courage to take up space in the world. The memory felt dangerous, like a door she'd opened and quickly closed, but couldn't quite lock again. Through that crack, light kept seeping in, illuminating possibilities she'd trained herself not to see. The classic clothing boutique Elena had recommended occupied a corner of downtown's shopping district like a monument to tasteful restraint. Pemberton and Associates Fine Apparel was engraved in modest gold letters on a wooden sign that whispered rather than announced, targeting women who understood the value of understated elegance and the dangers of making the wrong kind of impression. Inside, the racks were organized by color, in a gradient that moved from black through navy to the occasional flash of burgundy or forest green, colors that would never compete with a woman's personality or cause anyone to remember her outfit more than her character. Maya stood outside the store for 10 minutes before Elena's silver BMW pulled up to the curb with the precision of someone who had never questioned their right to park wherever convenient. Elena emerged wearing what Maya privately called her shopping outfit, a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, leather boots that clicked with authority against the pavement, and an expression of focused determination that suggested this expedition was a serious matter requiring professional attention. "Perfect timing," Elena said, though Maya had been waiting and Elena actually was 15 minutes late. "I called ahead and spoke to Margaret.
She's the owner, absolutely wonderful eye for what works on different body types. I told her we needed something sophisticated for a professional gala, and she's already pulled a few options. The interior of Pemberton and Associates felt like stepping into Elena's vision of how the world should operate. Quiet, orderly, expensive without being flashy. Margaret herself appeared to have been crafted specifically for this environment. A woman in her 60s with silver hair styled into a precise bob, wearing a navy suit that managed to suggest both competence and femininity without threatening either. She greeted Elena like an old friend, and Maya with the kind of polite assessment reserved for challenging projects. "Your sister has such wonderful instincts about these things," Margaret said to Maya while directing them towards a section of the store that felt like a museum dedicated to appropriate choices. "Your sister has described your coloring and build perfectly. I've selected several pieces that will be absolutely perfect for your needs." The first dress was black. Not the dramatic, sultry black of cocktail dresses or the sleek black of power suits, but a safe, forgettable black that seemed designed to absorb rather than reflect light. It had three-quarter sleeves, a modest neckline, and a hem that
Precisely at mid-knee, the kind of dress that could attend a funeral, a business meeting, or a social gathering without causing offense in any context. "Try this one first," Elena said, holding it up against Maya's body with the confidence of someone who had never doubted their aesthetic judgment. "The cut is so flattering, and black is always appropriate. You can accessorize it differently for different occasions. Pearls for something formal, a colorful scarf for something more casual." Maya took the dress into the fitting room, a space that was mercifully larger and more softly lit than the harsh environment where she'd fallen in love with emerald green. But as she slipped into the black fabric, she felt herself disappearing, not just visually, but existentially. The dress fit well, that was true. It was expertly tailored, made from quality fabric, designed by someone who understood how to create clothing that was both flattering and utterly safe. When she emerged from the fitting room, Elena's face lit up with the satisfaction of a job well done. "Oh, that's perfect!" she exclaimed, walking around Maya with the pride of a sculptor who had successfully carved away everything unnecessary to reveal the proper form beneath. "Margaret, you outdid yourself. This is exactly what I was hoping for." Margaret nodded approvingly, making small adjustments to how the dress fell across Maya's shoulders. "The proportions are ideal for your figure," she said to Maya, though she seemed to be speaking more to Elena. "And the quality of this particular fabric means it will photograph beautifully under professional lighting. You'll look elegant and appropriately dressed for any level of company." Maya looked at herself in the three-way mirror that dominated one corner of the boutique. The reflection showed a woman who would blend seamlessly into any professional gathering, who would photograph well next to Marcus, without overshadowing him, who would never be remembered for her outfit, but might be recalled as pleasant or well-dressed in a quiet way. It was exactly what Elena had promised, and exactly what some part of Maya's soul rebelled against with increasing intensity. "What do you think?" Elena asked, though her tone suggested that any answer other than enthusiastic agreement would be surprising and inappropriate. "It's very nice," Maya said, the words feeling like ash in her mouth. Nice? The most damning word in the English language for someone who had ever dreamed of being memorable, remarkable, impossible to ignore. Nice? Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. "Maya, this dress is elegant. It's sophisticated. It's the kind of piece you'll wear for years to different events. This is investment dressing, not trendy fashion that will look dated in photographs." Margaret brought over a selection of accessories that would complete the look. A strand of pearls that had probably been appropriate for the last 60 years, a small black clutch that could disappear entirely if set down on a dark surface, low-heeled pumps that prioritized comfort and good sense over any attempt at glamour or sex appeal. Each piece was individually lovely and collectively designed to ensure that Maya would never be the most interesting woman in any room.
Now let's talk about makeup and hair, Elena continued, settling into a comfortable chair as if she were directing a theatrical production rather than helping her sister choose an outfit. I think you should keep everything very natural, very classic. Maybe have your hair professionally styled, nothing too elaborate, just something clean and polished. And for makeup, definitely keep it understated. You want to enhance your natural beauty, not compete with it. Maya nodded automatically while something inside her chest grew tighter with each suggestion. The woman Elena was describing sounded like a professional extra in the movie of someone else's life. Always present, never distracting, completely forgettable. She thought of the children in her art classes who attacked blank canvases with fearless enthusiasm, who never worried about whether their creative choices were appropriate or marketable or likely to offend anyone's aesthetic sensibilities. Actually, Maya said, surprised by the sound of her own voice interrupting Elena's monologue about the importance of neutral nail polish, could I try one more dress, just to compare? Elena and Margaret exchanged a look that Maya had learned to recognize. The expression adults wear when indulging a child who doesn't yet understand how the world works. Of course, dear, Margaret said with professional patience. What did you have in mind? Maya felt heat creeping up her neck as she formulated her request. Something in green, maybe emerald green?
The silence that followed felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Elena's expression shifted through several emotions in a rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, disappointment, and finally a kind of gentle concern that Maya found more infuriating than outright anger would have been. "Honey," Elena said softly, using the tone reserved for explaining difficult concepts to someone with limited understanding, "we've talked about this. Green is a very tricky color, especially emerald green. It's so easy to look washed out, or for it to clash with your skin tone, or for it to send the wrong message entirely." Margaret cleared her throat diplomatically. "I do have a lovely forest green piece," she offered, clearly trying to find a compromise that wouldn't upset Elena while giving Maya some small concession. "It's much more subtle than emerald, very sophisticated, professional, but with a little more personality than black." "Forest green would be better," Elena agreed, though her tone suggested she was making a significant accommodation. "At least it's not as attention-seeking." The forest green dress was indeed more subdued than the emerald that haunted Maya's dreams. It was well-made and appropriately conservative, with long sleeves and a high neckline that suggested competence rather than allure. But as she slipped into it, she felt the same sense of diminishment that the black dress had created. This was green the way hospital scrubs were green, technically accurate but drained of any life or vibrancy. When she emerged from the fitting room, Elena's relief was palpable. "Now that's much better," she said, though her enthusiasm seemed forced. "Green is actually quite nice on you when it's the right shade. This is so much more appropriate than that bright thing you were looking at the other day." Maya looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman dressed for a job interview rather than a celebration. The forest green was pretty in a conservative, inoffensive way, but it made her feel like she was wearing a costume designed to help her disappear rather than an outfit chosen to help her shine. She thought about Marcus's excitement over introducing her to his colleagues, his pride in their relationship, his assumption that she would want to make the best possible impression on the people who mattered to his career. "I like this one," she said, because it was easier than trying to articulate the growing sense of loss she felt when she looked at either of Elena's approved options. They spent another hour at Pemberton and Associates, selecting accessories and discussing the finer points of appropriate gala attire. Elena paid for everything with the casual generosity that had marked their relationship since childhood, insisting that the dress was an early birthday present and that Maya deserved to feel confident and well-dressed at such an important event. "You're going to look beautiful, classy, and elegant. Marcus is going to be so proud to have you on his arm." Maya nodded and smiled and thanked her sister for the generous gift, all while feeling like she'd just agreed to attend her own funeral. The forest green dress would serve its purpose perfectly. It would ensure that she looked appropriate, that she didn't embarrass Marcus or herself, that she blended seamlessly into the background of his professional success story. But driving home in her own car, following Elena's BMW through the familiar streets of their shared childhood, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the emerald dress she'd abandoned. She found herself taking a detour that led past the original boutique where she'd first discovered it, slowing as she passed the window display where other women's dreams hung waiting for someone brave enough to claim them. The boutique was closed for the day, its windows dark except for the security lighting that illuminated the mannequins posed in attitudes of confidence and joy. Maya sat in her car across the street for almost 20 minutes, staring at those frozen figures and wondering what it would feel like to walk through the world with their apparent certainty that they deserved to be noticed, admired, remembered. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and she answered with the bright, cheerful tone she'd perfected for conversations about their shared future. "How did the dress shopping go?" he asked, genuine interest warming his voice. "Did you find something you love?"
Yes, Maya said, the lie sliding out with practiced ease. Elena helped me pick out something really elegant. Forest green, very classy. That sounds perfect, Marcus replied, and Maya could hear the smile in his voice. I can't wait to see you in it. Green is definitely your color. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on her. Marcus thought green was her color, but he'd never seen her in the emerald dress that had made her feel like she could conquer the world. He was thinking of the forest green that Elena had deemed appropriate, the safe choice that would complement his professional image without threatening anyone's expectations. I'm really excited about Saturday, he continued. This gala is such a big opportunity for the firm, and having you there with me, it means everything. You're going to charm everyone. I know it. Maya made the appropriate responses, agreeing that she was looking forward to the event, promising that she would do her best to make a good impression on his colleagues. But as the conversation continued, she found herself wondering who exactly Marcus was excited to introduce to his professional circle. Was it Maya Rodriguez, the woman who painted abstract masterpieces in her spare time and made children laugh with her silly voices during art class? Or was it the carefully curated version of herself that Elena had spent years helping to construct? After hanging up, Maya sat in her car for another few minutes, watching the darkened boutique windows and feeling the weight of choices made and unmade. Tomorrow, she would pick up her altered forest green dress. In 5 days, she would attend the gala wearing an outfit that would ensure she never stood out, never made waves, never risked being memorable for the wrong reasons. It was exactly what everyone wanted for her. It was exactly what she'd been trained to want for herself. But why did it feel like she was preparing to bury something precious and irreplaceable? The next few days passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like elaborate funeral arrangements than excitement for a celebration. Elena called twice daily to discuss details. What shoes Maya would wear, how she should style her hair, whether she needed to practice walking in heels. Each conversation reinforced the careful boundaries of appropriate behavior that Maya had learned to navigate, but with each discussion, the boundaries felt tighter, more constraining. At work, Maya found herself staring at the computer screen during a client presentation, watching Janet demonstrate the final logo design that Maya had created, the safe, forgettable version that met all requirements without inspiring anyone. The client nodded approvingly and signed off on the project, praising its professional execution and appropriate aesthetic choices. Maya smiled and accepted the compliments while thinking about the 3 alternative designs still hidden in her personal files, the ones that captured the restaurant's actual personality, instead of what a committee had decided that personality should be. Good work on the Morrison account, Janet said after the client left, her tone carrying the same warmth Elena used when praising Maya's clothing choices. This is exactly the kind of reliable, professional work that keeps clients coming back. You've really found your niche, Maya. Your niche. The phrase echoed in Maya's head as she returned to her desk, pulling up a new project that would require the same careful balance of creativity and constraint that had defined her career. She was good at her niche, comfortable in it, successful by any reasonable measure,
But sitting in her ergonomic office chair surrounded by mood boards and color wheels and all the tools of creative expression, Maya felt like she was slowly suffocating on her own competence. That afternoon at the community center, Zoe found Maya sitting alone in the art room after the children had left, staring at a blank canvas that she'd set up but hadn't touched. The late afternoon sun streamed through their windows, turning the empty white space into something that seemed to glow with possibility. But Maya's hands remained folded in her lap. "Rough day?" Zoe asked, settling into one of the child-sized chairs that surrounded the art table. At 5'8", Zoe looked comically oversized in the tiny seat, but she seemed completely comfortable with the absurdity of the situation. "I bought a dress for Marcus's gala," Maya said, without looking away from the canvas. "Elena helped me pick out something really elegant. Forest green. Very classy."
Zoe was quiet for a moment, understanding flowing between them without the need for additional explanation. They'd had enough conversations about Elena's influence in Maya's life for Zoe to recognize the tone that accompanied these family shopping expeditions. "How do you feel about it?" Zoe asked finally. Maya laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "I feel appropriate," she said. "I feel like I'll blend in perfectly. I feel like I'll never embarrass anyone or make them uncomfortable or force them to have an opinion about me one way or another." "That sounds absolutely terrible," Zoe said with characteristic directness. The honesty of the statement hit Maya like a physical blow. Because it was terrible. And until someone else had said it out loud, she hadn't realized how terrible it actually was. She'd been so focused on meeting everyone else's expectations that she'd stopped considering whether those expectations aligned with what she actually wanted from her life. "Elena means well," Maya said, automatically, the defense rising from years of practice. "She's just trying to help me avoid making mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" Zoe asked, leaning forward in her tiny chair. "Wearing a color that makes you happy? Choosing clothes that make you feel confident? Risking the possibility that someone might actually notice you?" Maya turned to look at her friend, seeing the frustration and affection warring in Zoe's expression. "You don't understand what it's like," Maya said. "Elena's been navigating these social situations her whole life. She knows what works and what doesn't. She's trying to protect me from embarrassing myself." "Or maybe," Zoe said gently, "she's trying to protect herself from being embarrassed by you." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge Maya wasn't sure she was ready to accept. The possibility that Elena's endless stream of helpful suggestions might be motivated by something other than sisterly concern was too threatening to examine too closely. If Elena wasn't acting out of love and protection, then what did that say about all the choices Maya had made based on her sister's guidance? "She bought me the dress," Maya said weakly. "It's expensive, beautiful in its own way. She was being generous." Generous people buy you gifts that make you happy. They don't buy you gifts that make you disappear. Maya picked up a paintbrush from the table, running her fingers along its soft bristles. "I don't know how to be any different," she admitted. "I've been taking Elena's advice for so long, I'm not sure I remember what I actually want anymore." Zoe was quiet for a long moment, watching Maya fidget with the paintbrush. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, less challenging. "What did you want when you were 7 years old, before anyone told you what was appropriate or safe or likely to get you in trouble?" The question opened something in Maya's chest that she'd kept carefully locked for years. When she was 7, she'd wanted to be an artist who painted murals on the sides of buildings, telling stories in colors that could be seen from space. She'd wanted to wear tutus to the grocery store and crowns to church and red shoes every single day because they made her feel like she could fly. She'd wanted to grow up to be the kind of woman who laughed too loudly and danced in the rain and never apologized for taking up space in the world. "I wanted to be brave," Maya said quietly, the words surprising her as they emerged. "I wanted to be the kind of person who tried new things and wasn't afraid of making mistakes. I wanted to matter." "The gala is tomorrow night,"
Maya said, still painting. I can't exactly change everything now. You can change one thing, Zoe said, standing up from her child-sized chair and stretching. You can decide who you want to be when you walk into that room, Elena's version of you or your own. Maya painted until the community center's security guard came to lock up for the evening, losing herself in colors and textures that had nothing to do with appropriate choices or professional requirements. The canvas she left behind was wild and unfinished, full of energy and life and the kind of fearless expression she'd learned to suppress in every other area of her existence. Driving home, Maya passed the boutique one more time. The emerald dress was still there, in the window, still waiting for someone with enough courage to claim it. Maya slowed her car, then stopped entirely, staring at the dress that represented everything she'd been taught to want, but never allow herself to have. She sat there for almost an hour, engine running, heat blasting against the autumn evening's chill. Other cars passed by, their occupants heading home to their own complicated lives, their own carefully managed compromises between desire and expectation. Maya watched them and wondered how many were driving toward versions of themselves they'd chosen and how many were simply following paths that had been chosen for them. Finally, she put her car in gear and drove home to her beige apartment, where Elena's forest green dress waited in her closet like a comfortable prison she'd learned to call home. Tomorrow night, she would wear it to the most important social event of her relationship with Marcus, surrounded by successful people who would remember her as pleasant and appropriate and utterly forgettable. Unless she chose something different. Unless she decided that being brave mattered more than being safe. Unless she finally listened to the 7-year-old girl who still lived somewhere deep inside her heart, the one who had never learned that wanting to be seen was something to apologize for. The morning of the gala dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes important decisions feel heavier and more consequential than they should. Maya stood in her bathroom at 6:30 in the morning, staring at her reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror while coffee brewed in the kitchen and the radiator clanked its familiar song of autumn mornings. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, not the carefully styled updo Elena had recommended, not the professional chignon that Marcus would expect, just her natural curls in their unrestrained state. She'd been awake since 4, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed every conversation that had led to this moment. Elena's voice, confident and caring, explaining why the forest green dress was the perfect choice. Marcus's excitement about introducing her to his colleagues, his assumption that she would want to make the best possible impression. Margaret's professional assessment of what would work best for Maya's body type and lifestyle. Zoe's challenge about who Maya wanted to be when she walked into that room. The forest green dress hung in her closet exactly where Elena had placed it after their shopping expedition, accompanied by the pearl necklace, black clutch, and sensible heels that would complete the look of appropriate elegance. She'd tried the entire outfit on the night before, standing in front of her full-length mirror and practicing the smile she would wear when Marcus introduced her as his girlfriend, rehearsing the polite small talk that would carry her through conversations with his colleagues.
And she'd felt like she was preparing to attend her own disappearing act. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Confirmed your hair appointment for 2 p.m. Remember to ask for something classic and professional. Can't wait to see you tonight. You're going to look beautiful. The message was followed by heart emojis and a gif of a woman in an elegant gown, the kind of aspirational image that suggested Maya should feel grateful for the opportunity to transform herself into someone worthy of such an important event. Maya set the phone aside without responding, returning her attention to the mirror. The woman looking back at her was 28 years old, educated, employed, in a stable relationship with a man who cared about her and wanted to include her in his professional life. By any reasonable measure, she was successful, well-adjusted,
living a life that many people would envy. So why did she feel like she was slowly disappearing, becoming more transparent with each compromise she made? The community center was closed on Saturdays, but Maya had keys from her volunteer work, and she found herself driving there after her second cup of coffee, needing to be in a space where she'd felt permission to be authentically herself. The building was quiet and empty, filled with the kind of peaceful silence that suggested possibility rather than loneliness. Maya let herself into the art room where her unfinished sunset painting waited on its easel, wild and imperfect and alive with the kind of energy she'd been trained to suppress in every other context. She pulled out her phone and, before she could second-guess herself, typed a message to the boutique where she'd first seen the emerald dress. "Do you still have the green dress from your window, size 8, with the beaded bodice?" Her finger hovered over the send button for almost 5 minutes before she finally pressed it, her heart racing as if she'd just committed an act of rebellion that could never be undone. The response came back within minutes. "Yes, we still have it. Would you like to come in for another fitting?" Maya stared at the message, feeling like she was standing at the edge of a cliff with a choice between safety and flight. Going back to that boutique would mean confronting Elena's disapproval, would mean risking Marcus's confusion, would mean choosing her own aesthetic judgment over the collective wisdom of everyone who claimed to care about her well-being. It would also mean claiming the woman she'd glimpsed in that fitting room mirror, the one who deserved to be seen and remembered and celebrated. "I'll be there in an hour," she typed back, then turned off her phone before Elena's next wave of helpful reminders could arrive. The boutique was busy with Saturday shoppers, women preparing for their own important events, accompanied by friends who squealed with delight when they found the perfect dress, who celebrated each other's boldness and beauty without reservation. Maya watched them from the doorway, marveling at the easy encouragement they offered each other, the way they seemed to assume that looking stunning was a reasonable goal rather than a dangerous risk. The sales associate who had helped her before, Jessica, recognized her immediately and smiled with genuine warmth. "You came back for the emerald dress," she said, clearly delighted. "I was hoping you would. It's been waiting for you. I actually moved it to the back room because I had a feeling you'd change your mind." The dress looked even more beautiful than Maya remembered, the emerald silk seeming to capture and hold light in ways that made it appear almost alive. Jessica handled it with the reverence it deserved, carrying it to the fitting room like she was transporting something precious and irreplaceable. "Take your time," Jessica said, hanging the dress carefully on the hook. "There's no rush. Just let yourself see what you see, okay? Sometimes we need a minute to recognize ourselves." Alone in the fitting room, Maya stripped off her jeans and sweater, the casual clothes she'd chosen for a day of careful decision-making. She'd deliberately worn her plainest undergarments, as if preparing herself for disappointment. But as she slipped into the emerald dress, she felt her body transform in ways that had nothing to do with the fabric and everything to do with permission. The dress fit perfectly, skimming her curves without hiding them, accentuating her waist, and highlighting the strength in her shoulders. The beaded bodice caught the fitting room's lights and threw them back in tiny sparks of brilliance, and the color made her skin glow with warmth and vitality she'd forgotten she possessed. But more than the physical transformation was the shift in her posture, the way her spine straightened and her chin lifted and her eyes met her own gaze in the mirror with something approaching defiance. This was the woman she'd glimpsed weeks ago, the one Elena had talked her out of becoming, the one who looked like she belonged in rooms where important decisions were made and celebrated. Maya turned slowly in front of the mirror, watching how the dress moved with her body, how it seemed to amplify rather than diminish her presence. For the first time in years, she looked like someone who deserved to be noticed, someone who had opinions worth hearing, someone who took up space in the world without apology. The fitting room door chimed as someone entered the boutique, and Maya heard a familiar voice discussing alterations with Jessica. Her heart stopped as she recognized Elena's crisp tones, probably shopping for accessories to coordinate with whatever conservative choice she'd made for her own evening plans. "I'm looking for something in pearls," Elena was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. Something classic, appropriate for formal evening wear. My sister is attending a very important event tonight, and I want to make sure she has the right accessories. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she realized Elena was here shopping for her, probably planning to surprise her with additional accessories that would complete the look of appropriate elegance they'd carefully constructed. She could hear Elena discussing the importance of understated jewelry, the dangers of anything too flashy or attention-seeking, the value of accessories that would enhance rather than compete with a woman's natural beauty. Actually, Jessica's voice was carefully neutral, your sister is here right now. She's in the fitting room. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an earthquake, heavy with potential energy that was about to be released in unpredictable directions. Maya could hear Elena's heels clicking against the boutique's polished floor and could imagine her sister's expression shifting from confusion to concern to the kind of gentle disappointment that was somehow worse than anger. Maya? Elena's voice was soft, questioning. What are you doing here, honey? Maya looked at herself one more time in the fitting room mirror, seeing not just the emerald dress, but the choice it represented, the decision to trust her own aesthetic judgment, to prioritize her own comfort and confidence over everyone else's expectations, to claim space in the world as someone worth noticing and remembering. I'm trying on a dress, Maya called back, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. But you already have a dress, Elena replied, confusion evident in her tone. The lovely green one we picked out together, the one that's so perfect for tonight's event. Maya's hand moved to the fitting room door handle, her palm damp with nervous sweat. She could still change her mind, could slip out of the emerald dress and back into her safe clothes, could meet Elena in the boutique's main area and explain that she'd just been curious, that she'd wanted to see the dress one more time before committing to the choice they'd made together. It would be the easy choice, the safe choice. The choice that would maintain harmony and avoid difficult conversations and ensure that everyone remained comfortable with the version of Maya they'd learned to expect. Instead, she opened the fitting room door and stepped into the boutique's main area, where Elena stood frozen in an expression of shock that quickly shifted through several other emotions before settling into something that looked like barely controlled panic. Oh, Maya, what are you doing? Maya felt exposed under her sister's scrutiny, but not in the way she'd expected. Instead of shrinking under Elena's disapproval, she found herself standing straighter, owning the space she occupied in the emerald dress. I'm choosing what I want to wear tonight, she said simply.
But we already chose, Elena said, stepping closer with the kind of careful movements people use around wounded animals. We spent hours finding the perfect dress, the perfect accessories. You said you liked the forest green. I said it was nice, Maya corrected gently. There's a difference. Elena's face cycled through several expressions before settling on the patient concern she used when Maya was being particularly unreasonable. Honey, this dress it's very bright, very attention-getting. Are you sure this is the message you want to send at Marcus's company event? What message do you think it sends? Maya asked, genuinely curious about Elena's answer. Well, it's a lot. It's the kind of dress that makes people focus on what you're wearing instead of who you are. And in a professional context, that can be problematic. People might get the wrong idea about you. Maya tilted her head, studying her sister's face. What kind of wrong idea? Elena's discomfort was palpable now, her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack under the pressure of explaining assumptions she'd never had to articulate. You know what I mean, that you're trying too hard, that you're more interested in being noticed than in being taken seriously, that you don't understand the appropriate way to present yourself in sophisticated company. The words hung between them like a challenge, exposing the underlying philosophy that had guided years of Elena's helpful suggestions. Maya was supposed to minimize herself, to disappear into backgrounds, to ensure that her presence never distracted from more important people or more significant conversations. What if I want to be noticed? Maya asked quietly. Elena's expression shifted to something that looked almost like grief. Oh, Maya, you don't want to be noticed for the wrong reasons. You want to be remembered for your intelligence, your kindness, your character, not for wearing a dress that screams, "Look at me." What if the dress isn't screaming, "Look at me"? What if it's saying, "I'm worth looking at"? The distinction seemed genuinely confuse Elena, as if the concept of claiming worth through appearance was foreign to her understanding of how women should move through the world. She looked around the boutique, perhaps hoping for support from Jessica or other customers, but found only interested observers who seemed more curious than judgmental about the conversation unfolding before them. "I don't understand what's happening here," Elena said, finally, her voice small and lost. "I thought we were on the same page about tonight. I thought you wanted to look elegant and appropriate. I thought you wanted to make a good impression." "I do want to make a good impression, but I want it to be an impression of who I actually am, not who everyone thinks I should be." Elena stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see her sister processing this concept, trying to reconcile the familiar Maya who accepted guidance and appreciated help, with this new version who was claiming the right to make her own aesthetic choices. "The four-screen dress is beautiful," Elena said, making one last attempt to redirect towards safer territory. "It's expensive, high quality, perfectly appropriate for the occasion. This emerald thing it's a lot of money for something you'll probably only wear once." "Maybe I want to be the kind of person who wears emerald green," Maya said, surprised by her own clarity. "Maybe I want to be someone who's worth wearing it for." The conversation was interrupted by Maya's phone buzzing insistently in her purse. She glanced at the screen and saw Marcus's name, along with a message that made her stomach drop. "Change of plans. Can you meet me at the venue early? Some people I want you to meet before the main event starts. Can't wait to show you off tonight." Elena saw Maya's expression change and immediately stepped closer. "What is it? What's wrong?" She showed her the message, watching Elena's face cycle through calculation and concern. "See?" Elena said, her voice gentle but urgent. "This is exactly what I was worried about. Marcus is already planning to introduce you to important people. You don't want to
Show up in something that's going to make him uncomfortable or make them remember you for the wrong reasons." Maya looked down at the emerald dress, feeling the weight of the choice she was about to make. In 3 hours, she would walk into the most important professional event of Marcus's career, wearing either the safe forest green that would help her disappear or the emerald that would announce her presence to everyone in the room. Elena was still talking, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she used when Maya needed to be guided away from dangerous decisions. "It's not too late to change your mind," she was saying. "We can go get the forest green dress right now, and you'll look perfect tonight. Elegant, sophisticated, exactly right for the occasion." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, trying to imagine herself in 5 years, 10 years, looking back on this moment. Would she regret playing it safe one more time? Would she wonder what might have happened if she'd been brave enough to claim the space she deserved? Would she spend the rest of her life wondering who she might have become if she'd trusted her own judgment about what made her feel beautiful? When she opened her eyes, Elena was watching her with an expression of desperate hope, clearly believing that reason and sisterly concern would ultimately prevail over whatever temporary madness had led Maya to this boutique. "I'm buying the emerald dress," Maya said quietly but with absolute certainty. Elena's face went completely white. "Maya, please, think about what you're doing. Think about Marcus, about his career, about the impression you'll make on his colleagues. Think about the photographs that will probably be taken tonight. Think about how you'll feel tomorrow when you realize you made a mistake." But Maya was already turning back toward the fitting room, already moving toward the choice that felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. "I am thinking about all of those things," she said over her shoulder. "And I'm thinking that maybe it's time for people to see who I really am." As she closed the fitting room door behind her, Maya could hear Elena's voice through the wall, probably asking Jessica about return policies and whether there was still time to talk sense into someone who was clearly having some kind of breakdown. But for the first time in years, Maya felt like she was finally having a breakthrough instead. The emerald dress hung waiting for her decision, beautiful and bold and completely unapologetic about the space it would claim in any room. Maya looked at herself one more time in the mirror, seeing not just a woman in a stunning dress, but someone who had finally chosen courage over comfort, authenticity over approval. In 3 hours, she would find out what happened when Maya Rodriguez decided to be impossible to ignore. The emerald dress hung in Maya's closet like a declaration of war against every safe choice she'd ever made. 3 hours until the gala, and Maya sat on her bed staring at it while her phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from Elena, each one a variation on the theme of, "Please reconsider before you do something you'll regret." But for the first time in her adult life, Maya felt completely certain about a decision that everyone else considered questionable. The drive home from the boutique had been surreal. Elena following her car like a concerned shepherd, trying to guide a wayward sheep back to the flock, both of them knowing that something fundamentally had shifted in their relationship, but neither quite ready to name it. When Maya had pulled into her apartment complex, Elena had rolled down her window and made one final plea. "Just call me if you change your mind. The forest green dress is still at my house. I could bring it over." Now, alone with her choice, she felt the magnitude of what she'd done settling around her like dust after an explosion. She'd spent $400 she couldn't really afford on a dress that would make her impossible to ignore. She'd rejected the collective wisdom of everyone who claimed to care about her well-being. She'd chosen her own aesthetic judgment over Elena's proven track record of social navigation. And she'd never felt more like herself in her entire life.
Her phone rang, startling her out of her thoughts. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and Maya answered with a mixture of excitement and terror about what the evening would bring. "Hey, beautiful," Marcus said, his voice warm with anticipation. "I'm at the venue helping with setup, and it's incredible. The ballroom is decorated like something out of a fairy tale, and everyone's talking about how this is going to be the event of the year. I can't wait for you to see it, and I can't wait for everyone to meet you." Maya felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Marcus, about tonight, I want you to know that I might look a little different than you're expecting." "Different how?" he asked, distraction evident in his voice as he multitasked between their conversation and whatever was happening at the venue. "I ended up choosing a different dress than the one Elena helped me pick out, something a little more bold." "I'm sure you'll look beautiful no matter what you wear," Marcus replied, automatically, the kind of response that meant he wasn't really listening. "Listen, I need to run. The lighting crew needs approval on the final setup. But, Maya, tonight is going to be amazing. This is exactly the kind of event where careers are made, relationships are formed, futures are decided. I'm so proud to have you there with me." After he hung up, Maya sat in the silence of her apartment, processing the weight of Marcus's words. Careers made, futures decided. Tonight wasn't just a party, it was a performance where everyone would be watching everyone else, making assessments and forming opinions that would ripple out into professional and social consequences she couldn't fully predict. The emerald dress suddenly felt less like a beautiful choice and more like a loaded weapon she wasn't sure she knew how to handle. But then, her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Thinking about you today. Remember that the right people will love you for being authentically yourself, and the wrong people's opinions don't matter anyway. Can't wait to hear how amazing you feel tonight." The message arrived like oxygen to someone who'd been holding their breath. Zoe had never met Marcus, had never been to a corporate gala, had no understanding of the delicate social dynamics that Maya was about to navigate, but she understood something more fundamental. That authenticity was worth the risk of disapproval, that being truly seen was more valuable than being universally accepted. Maya stood up and walked to her closet, running her fingers over the emerald silk. The dress felt different now, not like a rebellion against everyone she cared about, but like a homecoming to the woman she'd been before she learned to apologize for taking up space.
Getting ready became a meditation on choice and courage. Maya washed her hair and let it dry in its natural curls instead of straightening it into Elena's preferred smooth style. She applied makeup that enhanced rather than minimized her features. A bold red lipstick that matched her newfound confidence, eyeliner that made her brown eyes impossible to ignore, a subtle highlight that made her skin glow with health and vitality. When she finally slipped into the emerald dress, the transformation was complete. The woman looking back at herself from the full-length mirror was striking, confident, undeniably present. She looked like someone who belonged in important rooms making important decisions, someone whose opinions mattered, someone who deserved to be remembered. She took a selfie and sent it to Zoe before she could second-guess herself. The response came back immediately. "Holy shit, you look like a goddess. Marcus is going to die. Everyone is going to die. You're magnificent." The profanity made Maya laugh out loud, breaking some of the tension that had been building in her chest. This was what real support looked like, not careful suggestions disguised as protection, but enthusiastic celebration of her right to be fabulous. Her Uber arrived exactly on time, driven by a woman in her 50s who took one look at Maya and whistled appreciatively. "Now that's how you dress for an important event," she said as Maya settled into the passenger seat. "You look like you could run the world." "I'm starting to think I might want to try," Maya replied, surprising herself with the admission. The ride to the venue gave her 20 minutes to practice breathing exercises and remind herself that she had as much right as anyone to occupy space in that ballroom. She was educated, accomplished, articulate, kind. The emerald dress didn't change any of those facts. It just made them impossible to overlook.
The hotel hosting the gala was downtown's most elegant, its lobby filled with people in formal wear heading toward the ballroom where Marcus's firm was being honored. Maya watched them as she approached the event entrance, noting the confident way the women moved in their evening wear, how they seemed to assume their right to be there, to be seen, to be taken seriously, despite, or perhaps because of, their attention to their appearance. She gave her name to the woman checking guests against the list, received her elegantly designed name tag, and stepped into the ballroom that Marcus had described as fairy tale-like. He hadn't been exaggerating. The space was transformed with lighting that made everything glow golden, flowers arrangements that looked like they'd been designed by artists rather than florists, and round tables draped in linens that suggested celebration rather than obligation. Maya stood in the entrance for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the magnificence of the space, and watched as conversations paused around her. She could feel people noticing the emerald dress, their gazes lingering with appreciation rather than judgment, their expressions suggesting that she looked like she belonged in exactly this kind of spectacular setting. Maya? The voice belonged to Marcus, but it carried a note of uncertainty she'd never heard before. She turned to find him approaching with his expressions cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been concern. "Wow, you look incredible, but also different than I expected." "Different good or different bad?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer from his body language. Marcus seemed to be struggling with how to respond honestly without causing offense. "You look beautiful," he said carefully. "It's just, this dress is very striking, very attention-getting. I guess I was expecting something more." He trailed off, clearly searching for words that wouldn't sound insulting. "More like Elena would choose?" Maya supplied gently. "Maybe," he admitted, relief evident that she'd provided the words he couldn't find. "I mean, Elena has such great taste, and she understands these professional environments. This dress is gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but it's very bold. Are you sure you're comfortable standing out this much?" The question revealed more about Marcus's expectations than Maya had realized before. He wanted her there, wanted to introduce her to his colleagues, wanted her to represent their relationship well. But he wanted her to do it invisibly, to be an asset without being a presence, to enhance his image without creating her own.
I'm comfortable being seen, Maya said, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. I'm comfortable being remembered. Before Marcus could respond, a woman approached them with the kind of confident stride that suggested she was accustomed to commanding attention in professional settings. She was tall, elegant, wearing a deep burgundy dress that was sophisticated without being conservative, and her smile was warm and genuine as she extended her hand to Maya. "You must be Maya," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested international experience. "I'm Sarah Chen, head of the Environmental Commission. Marcus has told me so much about you, and I've been looking forward to meeting the woman behind some of those innovative design concepts he's mentioned." Maya felt Marcus's surprise radiating beside her as Sarah Chen, the Sarah Chen he'd been excited to introduce her to, clearly already knew who she was and seemed genuinely pleased to meet her. Sarah's eyes took in the emerald dress with unmistakable approval, her expression suggesting that Maya looked exactly as she should for an evening of this importance. "It's wonderful to meet you," Maya replied, accepting Sarah's handshake with growing confidence. "Marcus speaks about your environmental initiatives constantly. The work you're doing with sustainable urban development is fascinating."
Actually, Sarah said, turning to include Marcus in the conversation while keeping her primary focus on Maya, "I was hoping we might have a chance to talk tonight. The commission is looking for fresh perspectives on our public outreach campaigns, and from what Marcus has told me about your background in graphic design and community engagement, you might be exactly what we need." Maya felt the evening shift around her like tectonic plates realigning. This wasn't the polite social introduction Marcus had planned, where she would smile and make pleasant conversation before fading into the background. This was a professional overture from one of the most powerful women in the city's environmental sector, delivered as if Maya's expertise and opinions were valuable commodities worth pursuing. "I'd love to hear more about that," Maya said, her voice carrying a confidence she'd never felt at professional events before. The emerald dress seemed to amplify something inside her, making her feel worthy of the conversation rather than grateful to be included in it. Marcus cleared his throat, clearly struggling to process this unexpected development. "Maya does beautiful work," he said, his tone suggesting he was trying to be supportive while managing his own confusion about how the conversation had evolved so quickly beyond his control. "I'm sure she does," Sarah replied, but her attention remained focused on Maya. "Actually, would you mind if I introduced you to a few other people? There's a whole group here tonight who would be interested in your perspective on visual communication and community engagement." As Sarah began to guide Maya toward a cluster of well-dressed professionals near the bar, Maya caught sight of a familiar figure entering the ballroom. Elena stood in the doorway wearing her own version of appropriate elegance, a navy dress that was beautiful and conservative, accessories that suggested good taste without drawing attention. But Elena's eyes were scanning the room with the focused intensity of someone on a rescue mission. Their gazes met across the crowded space, and Maya watched Elena's expression shift from concern to shock to something that looked almost like betrayal. Elena had clearly hoped that Maya would come to her senses, would appear tonight in the forest green dress they'd chosen together, would prove that family wisdom ultimately prevailed over temporary rebellion. Instead, Elena was seeing her sister moving through the ballroom's elite social circles with a confidence that the conservative dress was supposed to have provided, but never had. Maya looked natural in this elevated setting, like she belonged among people who made important decisions and commanded respect for their opinions. "Excuse me for just a moment," Maya said to Sarah, who nodded understanding and moved to greet other colleagues while Maya walked toward her sister. "You wore it," Elena said when Maya reached her, her voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and resignation. "You actually wore the green dress?" "I did," Maya replied simply. Elena's eyes traveled from Maya's confident posture to the attention she was clearly receiving from other guests, to the way she moved through the space like someone who had every right to be there. "You look..."
Elena paused, seeming to struggle with words that didn't fit her usual vocabulary for describing Maya's appearance. You look like you belong here." The admission seemed to surprise Elena as much as it did Maya. For the first time in their adult relationship, Elena was acknowledging that Maya's instincts about self-presentation might be worth trusting, that the bold choice had produced exactly the kind of impression that Elena had always insisted could only come from careful conformity. "I feel like I belong here. Maybe that's what makes the difference." Before Elena could respond, Marcus appeared beside them with a slightly shell-shocked expression. "Maya, Sarah wants to introduce you to the mayor's chief of staff. Apparently, they're launching a new initiative around environmental education, and they want to discuss bringing you in as a consultant." Maya felt the words land like individual gifts, each one representing opportunities she'd never imagined for herself. Not because she wasn't qualified, she was beginning to realize she'd been qualified for years, but because she'd never presented herself as someone whose expertise was worth pursuing.
"That sounds incredible," she said, meaning it completely. Marcus nodded, though his enthusiasm seemed complicated by confusion about how the evening was unfolding so differently from his expectations. I need to ask, how did Sarah already know so much about your work? I mentioned you to her once, maybe twice, but she seemed to know specific details about your community center projects." Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks as she realized the answer. "I applied for a position with the Environmental Commission 6 months ago. I never heard back, so I assumed they weren't interested." "You applied for a job and didn't tell me?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a note of hurt that suggested this represented a larger betrayal than just withheld information. "I applied for a job and didn't tell anyone," Maya corrected, "because I was afraid people would think I was being unrealistic, reaching above my station, applying for positions I wasn't qualified for." Elena and Marcus exchanged a look that Maya recognized, the expression adults wear when discussing a child who needs guidance about realistic expectations. But the look felt different now, less protective and more presumptuous, as if Maya's assessment of her own capabilities mattered less than their assessment of what she should reasonably aspire to. "Maya," Elena said gently, "you have a good job, a stable position with benefits and security. It might not be wise to jeopardize that for something uncertain." The words were identical to ones Elena had spoken before, but this time Maya heard them differently, not as protective wisdom, but as an assumption that Maya's current life represented the ceiling of what she should reasonably expect, that reaching for more was inherently dangerous rather than inherently human. "It's a conversation, not a job offer," Maya replied, using Elena's own logic from their boutique encounter. "And even if it were a job offer, I'm capable of evaluating opportunities and making my own career decisions." The statement was simple, factual, completely reasonable. But coming from Maya, who had spent years deferring to Elena's judgment about everything from clothing to career moves, it represented a seismic shift that Elena was clearly struggling to process. Sarah appeared at Maya's elbow with perfect timing, her presence interrupting the family tension with professional authority. "Maya, I hope you don't mind the interruption, but there are several people who'd like to meet you. The response to your community center work has been quite enthusiastic." As Sarah began to lead Maya toward another group of professionals, Maya caught Elena's expression in her peripheral vision. Her sister looked lost, confused, as if the fundamental rules that govern their relationship had suddenly changed without warning. Elena had built her identity around being Maya's guide through social and professional complexities, and Maya's sudden success at navigating these waters independently left Elena without a clear role to play. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of conversations that challenged every assumption Maya had made about her own professional value. The mayor's chief of staff was indeed interested in her expertise with visual communication for public health campaigns. A city council member wanted to discuss her ideas about community engagement through art programs. 3 different nonprofit organizations asked her business card, and when she admitted she didn't have any, they insisted on giving her theirs with requests that she contact them about consulting opportunities.
By the time dinner was served, Maya found herself seated at a table with people who treated her opinions as valuable commodities, who asked thoughtful questions about her work, who seemed genuinely interested in her ideas rather than politely tolerant of her presence. Marcus sat beside her, clearly proud, but also somewhat bewildered by the version of his girlfriend who was emerging through these professional conversations. "I had no idea you'd applied to work with the Environmental Commission," he said during a quiet moment between courses. "Why didn't you tell me?" Maya considered several diplomatic answers before settling on honesty. "Because I was afraid you'd react the way Elena did, like I was being unrealistic, reaching too high, setting myself up for disappointment." Marcus looked genuinely hurt by the assessment. "Maya, I would never discourage you from pursuing opportunities. I want you to be successful and fulfilled. But you want me to be successful and fulfilled quietly." Maya said, not unkindly, "You want me to achieve things without changing, to grow without becoming different, to succeed without standing out."
"I need to say something," Elena said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar note of uncertainty. "I've been watching you tonight, seeing how people respond to you, how comfortable you look in conversations I always assumed would intimidate you. And I realized that maybe my advice has been more about my own fears than your actual limitations." The admission hung in the cool night air between them, representing a fundamental shift in their lifelong dynamic. Elena was acknowledging that her protective instincts might have been protecting Maya from opportunities rather than dangers, that her guidance might have been limiting rather than liberating. "I love you," Elena continued, "and I want you to be safe and happy. But I think I've been defining safety and happiness too narrowly. Tonight, you look like the most confident, successful version of yourself I've ever seen, and you're wearing a dress I told you was inappropriate." Maya felt tears threatening, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally being seen clearly by someone whose opinion had shaped her self-perception for so long. "I love you too," she said, "but I need you to trust that I can make good decisions about my own life, even when they're different from the decisions you would make." Elena nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears of her own. "I'm going to try. It might take me some time to adjust, but I'm going to try to see you the way other people see you tonight, as someone capable of handling whatever challenges come her way." As they stood together on the terrace, Maya in her emerald dress that announced her presence to the world, Elena in her navy blue dress that suggested careful restraint, Marcus somewhere between confusion and admiration, Maya felt the satisfying completion of a transformation that had been years in the making. She'd spent most of her life trying to become the woman everyone else wanted her to be. Tonight, she'd finally discovered the power of becoming the woman she'd always been underneath all that careful self-editing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How did it go with the dress?" Maya looked down at the emerald silk that had started the evening feeling like a risk and now felt like armor, like a declaration, like the most honest thing she'd ever worn. "Perfect," she texted back. "It was absolutely perfect." And as she looked out over the city that suddenly felt full of possibilities rather than limitations, Maya Rodriguez understood that the most important transformation hadn't been putting on the dress. It had been finding the courage to become someone worthy of wearing it. 6 months later, Maya would be running the Environmental Commission's Public Engagement Department. Living in a downtown loft apartment she'd chosen for its large windows and vibrant neighborhood. Dating a man who celebrated her ambitions rather than managing them. She'd have business cards with her own name and title, a closet full of clothes she'd chosen because they made her feel powerful and beautiful, and a relationship with Elena that was built on mutual respect rather than protective guidance. But all of that began with a single choice to trust her own judgment about what made her feel beautiful, to claim space in the world as someone worth noticing, to risk disapproval in service of authenticity. It began with an emerald dress and 6 words from a friend who saw her clearly. "You deserve to feel gorgeous."
Sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is decide that she's worth being seen. Maya Rodriguez stood in front of her new office window, watching the morning sun paint the city in shades of gold and possibility. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman in a tailored burgundy blazer and confidence that had become as natural as breathing. On her desk sat a framed photo from Marcus's gala, not the formal posed shots, but a candid moment where she was laughing with Sarah Chen and two city council members, her emerald dress catching the light as she gestured animatedly about community art programs. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Saw the article about your environmental education initiative in the paper? So proud of you. P.S. Found the most gorgeous sapphire blue dress that would be perfect for your award ceremony next month. Want to go shopping together?"
Maya smiled and typed back, "I'd love to, but this time I get to pick what makes me feel beautiful." "Deal," Elena replied immediately. "Can't wait to see what you choose." From her desk drawer, Maya pulled out a business card that had arrived in yesterday's mail. It was from the boutique where she'd bought the emerald dress, with a handwritten note from Jessica. "Thought you'd like to know. We've had dozens of women come in asking for the emerald dress like Maya Rodriguez wore to the environmental gala. You started something beautiful." Maya tucked the card back into her drawer, next to thank you notes from children in her expanded art programs, job offers from organizations that had seen her work, an invitation to speak at conferences about visual communication and community engagement. But most treasured was a photo Zoe had taken of her that first night, standing in her apartment in the emerald dress, her face radiant with the joy of finally recognizing herself. The woman in that photo had been afraid, but chosen courage anyway. She'd been uncertain, but trusted her own judgment. She'd been invisible, but decided to demand to be seen. And the world had been waiting to see her all along. Outside her window, the city hummed with the energy of people pursuing their dreams, taking risks, choosing authenticity over approval. Maya Rodriguez had become one of them, not because she'd changed who she was, but because she'd finally had the courage to let who she was be seen. Some transformations begin with grand gestures, dramatic moments, life-altering decisions made in the heat of crisis or inspiration. Others begin with a single choice to wear emerald green and trust that you're worth the attention it will bring. Maya's transformation had been the second kind, and it had changed everything.